Boy, it's gonna be a hell of a week for JJK, because not only do we got the fire manga, but obviously the anime is back for season 2, and that first episode was the definition of perfection to bring back this series, and I cannot wait. 23 episodes though, still weird. I don't know why it's not 24, but I already know all 23 of them episodes are gonna be nothing but masterpiece work from Mappa. But on to the manga, we continue Gojo versus Sukuna, and we got some pretty good explanations as to what's going on right now. Of course, more foreshadowing, and I think this one chapter alone is going to push a lot of agendas, especially for the Gojo fans. Let's get into it. Coming off Gojo capturing Sukuna's domain expansion inside Infinite Void, Kusakabe, who he's been like the lead commentator and narrator for this fight, was chatting about reaching the edge of a domain expansion in the escape route basically. There's a small panel of what looks like Dagon's domain in the background as he's talking, like an example of it, which I can see because Dagon's domain battle was kind of also like a race for when Megumi popped up, and then they used his domain expansion as an escape route. So I see the correlation between those two, and I like that Gojo used the time he spent in the prison realm as an inspiration for putting him and Sukuna in this small ass domain expansion. It's a really dope way of incorporating his ceiling into this battle, even learning while he's locked up. It's showing that even though Gojo is still the strongest, he's still evolving at some capacity. Also, like how Kusakabe talks about how domains have a set parameters of internal and external, like controlling the volume and the creation speed of your domain, and by discovering these parameters they blend them together, and thus they get their domain expansion. And I like how they showed my boys Higuruma and Hikari, they got some love because they look surprised by getting this info, because their domains open the way they do naturally by default because of their curse technique. So theirs is just naturally more open, which is a really cool concept, that there are some people that are just going to be naturally born with domain expansions open depending on what their curse technique is. My theory on it is that I feel like Hikari and Higuruma, by the time they got their curse techniques, they had a strong understanding of their techniques. So by the time that they were able to gain domain expansions, it just opened naturally, and thus that's how they got their non-lethal domain expansions, with these intricate rules set in motion, making them extremely dangerous. And we even see Hikari change the coordinates of his domain, so it being open like that is probably why he was able to do that in the first place. Now the domain is starting to crack. Gojo overtook the barriers, but Sukuna's range is decreased and his attack power is higher. Both of them come out of the barrier, and I'm not gonna lie, when I saw Gojo's eyes, I thought, damn, he might be fucked right here. But the shrine is shown to be destroyed, and we see Sukuna took some big damage around the stomach, and he's bleeding heavy even out the mouth. Still smiling though, because I know he's loving this shit. Like, this fight is probably, whether he wins or loses, even though we know he's gonna win, he probably gonna say this the best time he's ever had. Sukuna broke the domain expansion, but Gojo still got the technique off. They both got each other. We had a stalemate, and I know they can't really do anything right now because it's a 1v1. You never want to ruin the 1v1, but the gang is standing and reacting like they're watching a hype UFC fight or a playoff game. It's really cool, and it's kind of funny just seeing them get up and cheer in this literal death match that's gonna change the entire face of the series basically. Now it's been 3 minutes since their domains were active, which Kusakabe was really stressing heavy over. He was really trying to see who would have the upper hand when it comes to whose technique would probably come back quicker. And this whole time he's actually been the one that's probably been bugging out the most, which I guess looking at who's in this room is pretty valid. And shouts out to Mei for keeping up with the analytics. She looked fire as hell in the recent anime episode too. I clearly see what some of Mappa's budget went. So as they need time for their curse techniques to restore, we're still at this stalemate, and we go back to throwing hands and hand-to-hand combat. And very similar to Hikari and Higuruma, with more of the foreshadowing with Yuta in this case. They talk about using RCT to heal your curse technique, and that Gojo would have the upper hand in that. And they get to talking about how Yuta, he can't do that, even though he kind of specializes in it. He's one of the few that can. And I think in his next big fight, we're definitely going to see him try to pull this off. I think at this point, it's pretty much guaranteed. And one of the best parts of this chapter is the last stretch, because they talk about how dangerous and badass Sukuna's learning curve is. Gojo's using RCT on his curse technique, which can cause Sukuna to now do it, because since he saw Gojo do it in front of him, he's going to adapt and learn from what he saw and just use it himself. And an interesting tidbit, not sure if this was specifically stated, that Sukuna learned how to do this from Kenjaku, but he learned how to turn himself into a cursed object from him, which just makes me look at Kenjaku just even more sus than normal, because there has to be one last final plan that he has cooked up that absolutely no one is expecting. And the fact that Sukuna is someone who's extremely selfish, someone who views himself as the king of curses and everyone abides by it, the fact that he still learns from other people and just puts it into his bag, into his game, is really cool, because it just shows how dangerous someone is. It's one thing if you don't know something and you just stay away from it because you just don't want to do it, but those guys that can add it to their already deep bag, makes them even more dangerous, because now their options are going to start looking infinite. We get a great looking sequence of Sukuna running from Gojo, which that is crazy to think that Sukuna right now is running from someone, and they're destroying the ground with each jump that they take. It's really cool. As they're in their stalemate, Gojo's been thinking, why isn't Sukuna using his 10 shadows, especially during the last domain clash? That was his best chance to use it. And he questioned if it had anything to do with gaining Megami's memories and him using Maharaga, even though Gojo could potentially take it out quickly. I always felt that Sukuna wasn't going to use 10 shadows or even that square box thing from Shibuya, because they aren't his original curse technique, especially the 10 shadow, because the pride factor would kind of step in, because you want to be able to finish Gojo with your own curse technique. If he has to use Megami's, it's kind of almost like a you win for Gojo. But in the end, we see the wheel is activated. Gojo knows that this is going to be some tough shit to deal with, because now Sukuna's adaptability is going to be on tenfold heading into the next chapter. Entertaining chapter to say the least this week. I'm really interested to see how Sukuna's going to use his Maharaga wheel on the top of his head, because now I really want to see how someone would initially adapt to Gojo's Infinity or Reversal Red or something like that, because Gojo's whole thing is revolving the space around him and its opponent. So I wonder, how would someone physically do that? How would they counter that? So I'm interested to see how that's going to work. And the reverse curse technique aspect of the wheel too is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I really don't feel like he needs to summon Maharaga himself. He could and kind of push Gojo to fight 2v1 if he wanted to, but I feel like he just wouldn't need to use that right now. And Gojo looking really upset. I wonder if that's like a pride thing, that he wanted him to not use it, or did he just kind of know that, okay, things are really going to be hard for me, because he logically doesn't probably have a real counter to someone who could just adapt to on will like that, because once Sukuna used it on Yorozu, the game was pretty much over. Not comparing Yorozu to Gojo, but it kind of just gives you a glimpse as to just how much of a threat Sukuna becomes once he gets the wheel, because he feels almost impossible to take out. And I think at this point it's safe to say the domain expansion for Gojo is just not going to be a viable option. He's had it collapse every single time. He hasn't really gotten his sure hit to work except for that one last one, but at this point I feel like it's just too late. He's going to have to use Hollow Purple. He hasn't used it since the start of the fight. I think that's really his only real weapon to take down Sukuna, or at least deal some real significant damage. But at least you can kind of say he took the moral victory, because he forced Sukuna to use a different technique to try to take him down. I know a lot of Gojo supporters and fans, they probably gonna be a little mixed on this, because they think Gojo is stronger than Sukuna, and then, you know, Sukuna fans gonna chime in like, hey, that's his curse technique now. So it's gonna be pretty wild just to see how all this corresponds this next chapter. Also, I wonder if Megami has any stored memories from the past of having conversations with Gojo, and how Gojo fights, and anything regarding like past Zenin history, because him bringing that up in this fight feels like it's gonna be coming in play sometime, or maybe it was just used as kind of just to flesh out what's going on right now. I like that Megami was mentioned, so he's going to be playing a factor in this, probably somehow, maybe near the end. We know he talked with Gojo about the Zenin clan head versus the Gojo clan head, so I don't know if that conversation went any deeper, as Gojo kind of explains how and why the Zenin clan won. But regardless, I'm interested to see how all this plays out next chapter. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, of course. Check out the second channel, since Bleach is coming up this week. Look forward to that on my second channel, where I just review some of the Bleach episodes that's dropping. I'll holler at y'all in the next one. Peace.